Hello, dear listeners. This is a two-part episode. It's an incredibly fascinating conversation with a content creator who grew up in Israel. Make sure you check out both parts. And as usual, if you enjoy the show, please consider supporting it via patreon.com/nice mangoes. Welcome to the Polite Conversations podcast, where every episode is focused on civility, decorum, and good manners. And I'm your lovable, non-controversial host, Ina. If you know me, you know I definitely don't like to ruffle any feathers at all. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm here with Adi Callai. I will let Adi introduce himself to you. Hello, Adi. How's it going?
Hi, doing well.
I see that your video is going super viral. And you're a YouTuber. How would you describe yourself?
I would call myself, a writer and aspiring YouTuber. And I've worked a little bit in journalism. I research counterinsurgency and kind of military literature, military philosophy. And I grew up in so-called Israel and the entity, as I and others like to call it. And I'm now based in North America.
So I guess you don't fully identify as Israeli, or you don't embrace the term?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like defining myself. And I guess some of my project is about sort of the YouTube project in general. Since I started, is about breaking out of the confines of identity and the ways in which it is imposed upon us, and what this imposition serves in terms of the status quo, the state, colonialism.
Right. I really relate to your struggles with identity as well, because I am what they call a third culture kid. Like, I grew up in Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
I live in Canada now, and I am not of Saudi origin. I'm of Pakistani origin. So growing up in Saudi as a non-Saudi is like a bit of an odd experience, because there's like a bit of a separation in society there between the expats and the Saudis.
I can imagine. Did you grow up speaking Arabic at all?
No, so that's the thing. Like, I went to international schools, and my Arabic is limited to a few swear words. But, it's very familiar to my ear. It's like I was surrounded by it, like in the markets and everywhere that we went, but like I never actually spoke it. So I have a familiarity with it, just in how it sounds, but I don't know how to speak it. It's a weird thing to describe, I know. But I did notice that your Arabic pronunciation is very good. I mean, as much as I can say. I'm not exactly an expert, but I did take Quran lessons when I was little, and I can read the Quran. So I can, I suppose, read Arabic at a kindergarten level. But, so that's not really saying much.
It sounds like a lot to me.
Yeah. I mean, I came across your earlier video about weaponizing anti-Semitism, I think it was called. And I believe you made that like before October 7th, but you made it last year. And I related to it so much, because also I am a recovering new atheist. So I don't know, like, if you're familiar with that online subculture and how reactionary it is, and some of the like colonial tropes that you talk about and methods and tactics are very familiar from that scene to me. Just like the weaponizing of identity politics. So when you talked about how people weaponize their identity in favor of defending Israel, it was very similar to how I've seen like ex-Muslims be co-opted. So in the New Atheist scene, one segment of that is like the ex-Muslims, and having grown up in Saudi Arabia leaves you a little bit vulnerable to being angry with religion. So I kind of fell into that New Atheist scene, and I'm still not a believer or religious person, so definitely still an atheist, but not part of that increasingly right-wing scene that uses these identities to defend like Western chauvinism. And yeah. Sorry, I'm talking more than you, but then you did this recent new video called the Gaza Ghetto Uprising, which was just incredible, and how much information you packed into like almost 2-hour video. So why don't you first talk to me about like the weaponizing of anti-Semitism a little bit, and we can then discuss your newer video.
Sure, yeah, thank you. And that's really fascinating to hear about your own trajectory, and I look forward to hearing more. So weaponizing anti-Semitism, or anti-Semitism, weaponized period, was how I eventually titled it after going through a few different iterations. Mm-hmm. That started for me more as a project of trying to define Judaism, trying to define really even just the word Jew, and tracing it etymologically. And
just to be clear for the audience, you are of Jewish background.
Yeah. And so kind of arriving at this kind of radically inclusive definition, or thinking about Jew as following this philosopher Adorno as a non-identity, or I like to say it as a counter-identity. Mm-hmm. So maybe like a way that we can connect to a certain cultural complex, but one which is not exclusionary, and that invites people into a radical history or a radical spirituality.
Right.
So I guess that was kind of the positive or the constructive aspect of the project, but it comes up against, of course, the destructive reality, which is that Jewish history and tradition is weaponized primarily against Palestinians, but also against Jews themselves, I would say. Mm-hmm. And that sort of brings the kind of main political project of the video, which is laying out how sort of the history of the anti-Semitism accusation, so the weaponization of anti-Semitism for colonial purposes. And I trace it to this figure that became very influential in the 1980s, Shmuel Ettinger, who would specifically weaponize this accusation against the global left, or like global socialism. Mm-hmm. And now, of course, it's become Israel's primary discursive weapon, like the primary justification of the ongoing atrocities against the Palestinians.
Right, and you were talking about people that we've all become like a lot more familiar with since October 7th. Like you were talking about Hen Mazzig in that video, which I found really interesting looking back, because when I saw your video, I didn't really know him. I think it was like right after October 7th that I came across your video. And now I was watching it again today in preparation for our conversation, and now I'm a lot more familiar with him and also blocked by him.
Congratulations. That's cool. So he hasn't discovered me yet, as far as I'm aware.
I didn't really say anything too harsh to him. I think I just quote tweeted one of his tweets critically, but whatever. And you talking about how he uses that, I'm a gay Jew of color thing in defense of Israel was really, really interesting to me, because now we're starting to see, like the rest of us are starting to see that play out. And how there was some quotes that I thought were really good in there, how you talked about how that whole use of identity politics is a Zionist entryism into progressive discourse, creating the mirage that Israel is congruous with woke politics, never mind that homophobia is enshrined in Israeli law. Can you talk to me about that quote a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, Chen Mazig is specifically a very interesting case because we can see what I call ID psyops, or like identity-based psychological operations, sort of operating discursively, definitely sort of in our everyday lives on social media without state intervention, just the way that that counterinsurgency kind of seeps in culturally, like that's what makes it effective. But then Chen Mazig is interesting because there's this journalist, Aidan Pink, who was able to demonstrate that he was like literally hired by by the Israeli government, by the Ministry of Strategic Affairs, to go around U.S. campuses, and there's this term called pinkwashing.
Yeah.
Probably your listeners are aware of it, but yeah, you know, creating this mirage of Israel as this queer haven, you know, in the conservative, dangerous Middle East. But of course, in the video, I cite a few different sources that demonstrate that like homophobia is legally enshrined in Israel, that Israel weaponizes.
Didn't like Smotrich self-identify as a fascist homophobe one time?
Possibly. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that I read that.
Yeah, I mean, there are right now in government, there are definitely ministers who are openly homophobic, and
Gay marriage is not legal in Israel, as far as I know, right?
Yeah, gay marriage is not legal. Civilian marriage is not legal, actually.
So it has to be religious marriage?
Yeah. So like the secular population, the secular Jewish population tends to marry by going to Cyprus, for example, and getting a civil marriage there, and then coming back to and having the sort of the foreign recognized marriage approved. Right. Otherwise, they would have to go through the rabbinate council, which also many people do. But yeah, it's also like a very religious conservative society.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how that is kind of not as obvious, right? And how it's popularized for being this liberal haven and super gay friendly when these basic rights are still not enshrined in law. And I actually had a very good, long-time queer Israeli friend who, during all of this, has really radicalized, and we are no longer really able to maintain a friendship. It's very unfortunate and shocking to me because, you know, he always talked about human rights and secularism and all of that until October 7th. And I don't know what happened. Like, something just changed in him. And he's fully supportive of the quote-unquote war. Like, he's not even critical of that. Like, there are Zionists that are like, oh yeah, you know, we need a ceasefire and we need a hostage deal, but that's not even where my supposed liberal, progressive, secular friend was. Yeah,
October 7 was really revealing in that way.
It really...
So many, I can't tell you how many bridges of mine have burned since then.
Yeah, it's been a strange, life-changing period for me, and I'm sure more so for you since you're more connected in that world.
Yeah.
But, yeah. You said also that you don't like to talk much about yourself in your video. Why is that?
I don't know. It's tricky.
Is it for like safety reasons or like just like keeping the peace?
I suppose that's part of it. But it's also more than that. Is like I want the strength of my ideas to resonate, or the strength of what I'm trying to say, and not the sort of the perceived idea of who I am. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like I want this to be larger than me, and obviously it's not about it's not about me in the first place, or I don't want it to be about me in the first place. I want it to be specifically right in the Gaza Ghetto Uprising. I want it to be an urgent intervention so as to stop the genocide, and it's kind of this very like lofty and ambitious goal, but that's sort of the main motivation. So, so I do talk about myself a little bit, and like if that means like trying to achieve my goals means also talking about myself or like using my position, then I will.
Right. Yeah, like I think it does help people to know where you're coming from a little bit, that you grew up in Israel, that you also are not unaffected by what happened on October 7th. You know, you had a family member that lived in one of those kibbutzes, right?
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned that they were locked in the safe room all day and you were scared. But at the same time, you view all of this in a larger context. And it was just a really important and refreshing perspective coming from someone that grew up in Israel, because that's not one that we see too often. So I'm sure you got a lot of great feedback on that.
Yeah, that's a piece that that really resonates with people. Mm-hmm. So that's why I chose to include it, even though obviously I feel very mixed about it.
Yeah, I think it's important. How about other, like, have your family members seen like your views online? Have they talked about it? I'm sure it's controversial. I'm
trying to. Well, I'm not trying very hard to keep it from them. My mom is aware of my channel and subscribed with alerts. So,
oh boy,
and she just immediately kind of reads anything I write and watches anything I produce. So she has seen it, and I think it was pretty difficult, but also like interesting and impressive for her. And yeah, I don't know if the rest of the family has seen it yet. You know, it's only been a week, and it's still kind of in this process of like slowly exploding. Mm-hmm. So I imagine it's at some point it'll get to them, and yeah, I don't know. It's all very overwhelming, and I'm trying not to worry about it too much. But
right, I think it was really brave of you to take the stance that you did, and yeah, like I can imagine that there will be some blowback. And you talked also about like how sort of asking for any evidence with your Israeli friends for some of the atrocity propaganda type stories was like an immediate cancellation. And you know, I just have that like a couple of experiences here and there with my friends who are of Israeli background, and it's been super unpleasant and sad for me. I can't imagine how it's been for you, because your perspective is so wildly different. Like, I encourage everyone listening to go and check out your videos. I'll link them in the show notes. And yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm still kind of processing it all. So you're catching me in a big moment personally. It's like I've worked on this video basically since October 7th. It's like immediately when I started seeing the images coming out of the Palestinian resistance, I started collecting those videos. They were just, you know, visually so striking. I was like, okay, this is something I'm going to have to talk about.
And within like a week or so, it's gotten at least 100,000 views for like a fairly, you know, right now, like I'd say how many subscribers at the time of this recording, 5,000 or 6,000?
Yeah, so I had a very small channel, like less than 1,000 subscribers before I put out this video. Now it's exploding. Obviously, like on the scale of YouTube, or even obviously other YouTubers you've had on your show, it's like it's nothing. But it's a big deal for me, and I don't know where it will go because it's the pace, like the exposure is not abating, and I'm being like inundated with messages. So I'm like every day, and I'm kind of processing that,
Yeah, well, hey, thank you for for coming on my show in the middle of all of this. I can only imagine how hard it is to sift through all the messages.
No, I mean, I've really appreciated you. Like you reached out like a long time ago. I think soon after October 7, right? And like I can't remember exactly when it was. And I was like, yeah, I'll come on the show, and I just didn't have the time because I was working on this video, and just felt so urgent to put it out, and I kept putting it off and putting it off until August, when I was like, okay, it doesn't feel ready yet. Like even when I put it out, I was like, oh, there's still things I should tweak, but I just really wanted to put it out before the school year starts, to like try to speak to American college students, honestly. And so I just sort of rushed through the final few days to like put it out on like at the end of August. And now I'm like, I could have tweaked the sound a little bit. And,
I know that feeling.
Yeah.
You got to stop yourself at some point.
Yeah. And I was just writing.
Yeah.
Like most of this time, I just kept writing and reading, and I don't know what's going to happen with it in the future. But
it's really well produced, like in terms of just the production. You've got the sound done really well, and the editing is great. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you're getting the response to it that you are, and I hope that more people watch it. It's quite the comparison that you make, the one that Masha Gessen also made and got like canceled for immediately. And you also mentioned that Refaat Al-Areer made that comparison on BBC, where he said it's like the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, and we should like not just lay down and die, we have to resist. And I think the BBC apologized for airing that interview, and then soon after he started getting threats from Israeli phone numbers, and then we all know what happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really brave of you to just title it that.
Yeah, and again, like you're right in that it resonates differently when I titled it this way from my positionality again. Yeah. So there was also a certain like feeling a certain sense of duty to like vindicate Refaat Al-Areer for making this comparison on BBC like immediately after October 7. By recalling that history. And there's so much there that I could have discussed more, just in terms of the Warsaw Ghetto, the history of the Warsaw Ghetto specifically. But I really just wanted to talk about Sobibor because it's a much less known story, and it's literally what occurred to me at like 7 a.m. I was like, oh my God, Sobibor.
Yeah, and have you received any like backlash for that since putting it out? Like major? So
the backlash is mostly like just a horde of the Zionists. In Hebrew we call them tokbetistim, like commenters, like people who are sort of excessively online and kind of hurl abuse at you in the comment sections. And so there hasn't been any major call out or doxing yet. But
so you don't like have your own anti-Semite of the week page yet?
It hasn't happened yet. I'm like ready for it.
Yeah, brace
as much
yourself.
As possible,
Yeah.
But it hasn't happened yet, and the abuse is mostly filtered by YouTube. So I tried to read all of the comments, which is partially why I'm kind of underslept and on edge. But a lot of the abuse I don't read because it just gets immediately flagged and is held for review. So thankfully, most of the reaction I've gotten is like overwhelmingly positive and affirming.
That's great. Has any like mainstream media reached out to you to talk to you about it, or?
Not so far.
Okay, fingers crossed. I mean, I don't know that they would love to hear that perspective on Western media, but I hope that they do.
Yeah, I definitely don't expect Western media to reach out. I mean, the narrative would resonate, I guess, with like Al Jazeera audience. Maybe that's the most mainstream I can think of, but I don't expect others to reach out. Though who knows? I mean,
yeah, you never know.
As I said, I'm kind of watching this explosion happen in slow motion.
If you become famous with your own HBO show, then you'll have to come back and give us like a breakdown of how that all went.
That'd be ridiculous. Hopefully, yeah, that'd be funny. I appreciate it.
What actually put you on this trajectory of like solidarity and doing that sort of work with Palestinians?
Yeah, so...
What's your origin story?
Yeah. Okay, asking personal questions. I decided I didn't want to get drafted to the Israeli army after the first major assault on Gaza that I witnessed in my lifetime. And I got an exemption. Basically, any Israeli who doesn't want to do army service can get an exemption.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's they just need to tell them that they're crazy, or tell them about their dreams, or that they don't know what they'll do to themselves if they go to the army, that kind of stuff. So when they tell you that they have to, that it's obligatory, you can just tell them that. It's very easy to get an exemption if all you want to do is to just get out as quickly as possible, and that's what I wanted.
Right.
Of course, it's different if you're trying to make a statement out of it, like to be a conscientious objector.
Right, like those teenagers who
I hugely respect and admire, and there were moments in my life where I was like, oh, in hindsight, maybe I should have done that, but I don't know. I sort of go back and forth about it, but right now I'm like happy with my choice. Definitely, I've been thankful every day since then for the fact that I haven't gone to the Israeli army, and and it just opens the world to you. To not go through the military indoctrination within the institution itself. So I did go through the Israeli educational system, which is obviously like a militaristic indoctrination system. But somehow I didn't want to participate, and then my mind opened to the other things that were happening, to what was out there. And at the time, the struggle in Sheikh Jarrah was just taking off, and Mohammed al-Kurd, I don't know if you know him, Mohammed al-Kurd.
Yeah,
he's like a major figure, a major voice for Palestine. At the time, he was like a young kid, and he probably doesn't remember me, but those were when those protests were just starting in Sheikh Jarrah, when Palestinian families were being kicked out of their homes, and Israeli settlers were moving in the same day, and I started joining these joint kind of Jewish and Palestinian protests against those evictions, and just kind of snowballed into the anti-apartheid movement. And that's when I started learning Arabic, doing accompaniment work in Masafir Yatta with the Palestinian shepherds who were trying to sort of get access to maintain or regain access to their grazing land.
So people that knew you are not going to be surprised by your views currently, because you've been engaging in these types of activities for a while.
Yeah, I guess not, but it's hard to say because I think because of my analysis of October 7 is very unusual, even for people with a similar trajectory, just based on what I'm observing right now from afar, like just talking to peers and so on. It's there's still a wide gulf to cross to get from the kind of anti-apartheid, Palestinians are human beings, to a kind of Palestinian resistance is necessary to end Israeli colonization position. Like there's still a wide chasm, I would say. And maybe that's also because I haven't been there for at least a year now.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're there, it's also like when it's constantly, when like Israeli propaganda is constantly hammered at you, it's more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think they wouldn't be surprised, but they might find the opinions shocking. Like this is it's so unthinkable for Israelis to support Palestinian resistance,
Right. Yeah.
And
yeah, I mean, I was surprised by that too. So
yeah, it's not completely unthinkable for Israelis. Like I wouldn't say that, but it's very unusual, and it's even more unusual to see people like putting their face,
yes,
like saying it publicly at all.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
So maybe not on the personal level, but maybe on the broader level. And I'm not sure. Again, it's a very early stage of.
It's early, so that remains to be seen, and hopefully it'll be okay.
Yeah.
But at the very least, someone will try to cancel you.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, but what is really interesting to me is like how much like military strategy and knowledge and tactics you discuss in that one video. And that's not usually a subject that I'm interested in at all. But somehow you put it in a way that's really a unique perspective. You talk about how the resistance could be like using the rubble strategically. You talk about how it reminds you of another time when the city was bombed so much that the tanks couldn't operate effectively. And so essentially just like making things more difficult for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, so how is it that you know so much about this stuff? Are you, like, did you study anything military related or?
Yeah, I do. So I do study it, and
academically.
Yeah, but not in I guess not in a military academy. So I don't get to. Like I get to do my independent research, but I don't really get to talk to the authors and to the generals. So there is, I think there's something still lacking about my methodology, and like I would like to, to be able to interrogate these people, like to interview them, to understand them better, and maybe that's something that I should think about how to do.
What is your field of study?
But I do research it. Like I read it. I study military philosophy and counterinsurgency. So I read them. I listen to their podcasts. I grew up in like a militaristic society. So I do know people who are like officers. Some of them like high-ranking officers. Like just for my personal life. But
I can't imagine what they're gonna think of your video.
Yeah, who knows? But some of them kind of so the ones, I mean, they're not the people who are writing the manuals, but they're people who are familiar with military doctrine enough to like hear the stuff and respect it. So I did run the thesis about like the Israel's strategic vacuum. I did run it by a friend of my parents who is like a security person who reads Israeli army, or like read Israeli army doctrine, is like, and he did agree with that, with the hypothesis. So
your basic hypothesis for the audience was summarized, obviously, that there was a vacuum because there was so much focus on taking land in the West Bank.
Sort of. There's so the strategic vacuum is basically comes after October 7, because Israel's strategic approach until then has been a kind of management of the conflict, especially under the Netanyahu administration. So try as much as possible to keep things as they are, a durable peace, as he calls it in his, which is the title of his book. And
which is so ludicrous because there's no peace.
yeah, I mean, well, it's just like a violent peace, right? And Palestinians were able to shatter the equilibrium, right? And so the strategic vision that you could sort of keep going in this apartheid situation indefinitely, it just shattered. And now the hypothesis is that there are different strategic visions that are trying to fill the void. So I explain it in the video in more detail, but it's like counterinsurgency on one side and like messianic genocide on another, kind of brimstone, wipe out the Palestinians on the other, which is extremely popular but very difficult to enact when people are fighting back.
You know what's really interesting, coming from the perspective of a recovering new atheist, is how pretty much all of the main figureheads of that scene are so pro-Israel and barely mention or care about the, as you say, the messianic, genocidal, like, extremism that's being used to enact this. And in a similar way, they're also very, like, blind to Christian nationalism.
Yeah.
It's really, like, about one extremism that they are concerned about, and that is Islamic extremism, which they extrapolate onto the entire Muslim population. Basically, anyone can be a jihadist at any time. Like, if you let in Muslim immigrants, there can be a number of jihadists getting through. So how can we feel safe doing that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Never mind all the other types of extremisms that are flourishing currently and in more power in Western countries.
Right. Yeah, and it's almost like it doesn't, like, the truth of the matter, like exactly what you're saying, doesn't matter to them. It's just the story that they're telling, like the narrative, this narrative that they find mobilizing.
Yeah. So it just lays the whole project super bare for me, because it really never was about secularism or humanism or counter-extremism. It was about just Western imperialism, Western chauvinism. That's what it was about.
Yeah, and then I guess the purpose of the military theory angle is to see whether, like, reading them and studying them, you can find something useful, right? Both tactically and strategically, and also on the level of even of the will to fight, which is a really important factor. It's like to understand that the enemy is fallible, like to read Israeli army theory and just to comprehend how incompetent they are, how bad they are at what they're doing, like can be empowering. You know? Right? They're trying to create this mythology that they're all powerful and omniscient. And of course, the Al-Aqsa flood, like on October 7th, demonstrated that this is false.
Right.
They're trying to rebuild their image as a powerful military by just using a lot of force on the Palestinian population.
But I feel like, and I'm no expert, but it's coming off as very incompetent and indiscriminate, not really powerful.
Like almost like a temper tantrum.
Yes, exactly.
And that's something that historians like Ilan Pape, who have been looking at it, have been saying, like in historical terms, it looks like the temper tantrum before the fall, kind of.
Though that could last for decades in itself.
Who knows how long it will last? It's hard to imagine them lasting for decades with the way they're currently operating. But yeah, who knows? Yeah,
it almost seems like a self-destructive rage.
Yeah. It's nuts looking at it from outside, and and wanting your family, people you care about, to leave, but like it's like the frog in
The boiling pot of water.
In the pot of boiling water. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, do you feel like your family members like are considering moving, or?
Maybe the younger ones. Definitely not. My parents are not. Yeah, I hope for like younger people to find a way out, and I'm trying to be helpful, but it's hard to. I don't know.
You had this other quote in the Gaza Ghetto Uprising video. I just wanted to read that and get your comments on it. Talking about security and safety, you said, Israel has so far dropped the equivalent of 5 nuclear bombs on Gaza. Israelis can thus expect to receive the equivalent of 1 nuclear bomb in return fire at some point in the future. Now, what was the purpose of this war? Security? And because you're talking about like how unexploded bombs dropped on Gaza are what's used by Palestinian resistance groups to create their ammunition. And it's really bizarre to think that this will result in more safety and security for anyone.
Yeah, I know. It's mind-boggling. It's dumbfounding, Like
I certainly hope that nobody has to go through any more violence or any more bombing. But if you already know that these unexploded bombs are being used in return, and then you're dropping so many bombs, of which some will be unexploded, how can you think that that is going to lead to security? There's so much about this that just, it makes you feel like you're going crazy, like just hearing all the politicians, regardless of party, parrot, Israel has a right to defend itself, no matter what is happening in reality, no matter how brutal Israel's assault is, no matter how many civilians, children, whoever is targeted, how many reports come out that innocent civilians are intentionally targeted. There's just this one line that they're saying, and it makes no sense in this context.
Yeah, it's true. It makes no sense. It's completely ahistorical. Like Israel was only able to achieve stability through concessions and negotiations. Like it's never been able to bomb itself to stability. So yeah, now they think they can genocide Gaza into like stability and security and safety. It's just so false.
Right.
And like there are people who are pragmatic about it, and they're the ones who are pushing for counterinsurgency. They're like the liberal Zionists, but they're so marginalized in Israeli society that it's hard to imagine this whole thing ending in anything other than a total catastrophe for the Zionists who are still there.
And they're like wanting more and more of it, which is strange. And then there's also the line where the politicians are parroting across the Western world that we want peace, we want a ceasefire, and then on the other side they're like shipping them arms. So yeah. I mean, a lot of it is like a material analysis can be helpful here. Like a lot of it is driven by like market forces and the arms industry and people's financial interests. That's why RMA is so powerful. But then how do you say with a straight face that you want an end to the violence when you know that the market forces will cause you to keep sending weapons? Like it just, because it ends up making you look stupid.
It does, yeah. And there's a crisis of legitimacy, I think, for U.S. imperialism on a global scale because of it. Yeah. So there are global implications to U.S. leaders and the Democratic Party going forward with this.
Yeah, I feel like it's just going to make everyone less safe in the whole world. And that is not a good feeling.
Yeah.
The other thing that I wanted to discuss with you was in your anti-Semitism weaponized video, one of the reasons why I found that video was because I was looking up this manual that didn't seem real to me. It was called like the Global Language Dictionary or something that was like for Israeli media spokespeople, and it was just like giving them these like talking points on how to defend Israel, and there are so many like that you see repeated, the same kinds of absurd talking points that don't even really work now. And I was like, this cannot be a real thing. I had seen some like TikTok videos talking about it, and I was like, this sounds like anti-Semitic. Like someone has just made up that there's this manual, and no, I was led to your video, and it's an actual real thing that was distributed by some Zionist organization, and they have like talking points like, you know, turn the tables and just like absurd stuff. Use empathy, like say, like show that you care about the Palestinians while you're defending Israel's actions against them. And you just see that like everywhere in the spokespeople.
Yeah, 100%. It's remarkable. I mean, so the person behind it, this guy Frank Luntz, is actually a conservative Christian, like American Christian media personality and pollster. And the research is based on like extensive polling, trying to see how audiences react to different talking points. And they produced this manual and distributed it to their spokespeople, and it leaked eventually. And then you just see it demonstrated to the T by Zionist spokespeople from Hillary Clinton to like Israel's foreign minister. Just these stages, one after the other. So the video lays it out pretty clearly, right?
Yeah. Just the inversion of the narrative, like to be claiming to be a victim as you're assaulting tens of thousands of people, murdering them and slaughtering them. That is just so brazen and so absurd to see again and again and again.
And this was like the Frank Luntz. So the first research was like late 2000s. The first manual, I think 2009.
2009.
Yeah, 2009. But then he did another research after October 7th.
Oh.
And this briefly appears in the Gaza Ghetto Uprising video as well, because in the section about the atrocity propaganda, because he is one of the people who like identified and demonstrated empirically that audiences respond to the rape story and to the massacre story more than anything else.
Wow, yeah.
So we can see, right, this conservative pollster, this like Fox News guy, then in cahoots with like the New York Times and Haaretz, right, these liberal publications, in generating this false atrocity propaganda that justifies genocide to the liberals. And I'll give you something from here that I haven't discussed in this video and might go into a future project. Is I was particularly fascinated, like seeing liberals, even people who I had vaguely known from the anti-apartheid movement, like people who, you know, like two-state solutions kind of people.
From Israel?
Israelis, who were like sharing the atrocity propaganda, and especially the rape stories, right? And I understood, okay, so this is the way that the liberals are justifying the genocide to themselves. And so I was like, okay, how did it work in Germany? With like, there was a huge, you know, progressive liberal German population producing like amazing literature in the 1920s and 1930s, you know, and cultural works and so on. And how were they, like, they knew what was happening in the concentration camps, and like they saw their Jewish peers disappearing. How did they justify it for themselves? And so it's just like a little, I kind of went down down this rabbit hole, and it didn't make it into the Gaza Ghetto Uprising, but maybe in the future. And it's like there's the narrative of sort of the rape narrative today, and the ISIS narrative specifically, which like Hamas's ISIS was something that went really hard, really the first sort of week after October 7, and then it kind of declined. So we're like, okay, maybe we can't really, it doesn't really work, just kind of geopolitically. But yeah, it correlates with the myth of Judeo-Bolshevism in Germany. So they were afraid of that Jews were communists and they were in cahoots with the Soviets, and they were going to try to do a Bolshevik-style revolution, a communist revolution in Germany.
Echoes of which we see in the campus culture wars currently in North America.
Yeah, sure. Definitely.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess these liberal ways of justifying these atrocities have always existed. But, it's one thing to read about this stuff in history books, and it's quite another to witness it in real time. It just has felt maddening to see like how the New York Times manufactured that story, the Screams Without Words, how it was thoroughly debunked, how even their own podcast about it was withheld or something like that, right? Like it didn't pass their own journalistic standards. And still, I believe that the article is still up. Yeah. They have not retracted it, even though they fired the author, right?
I mean, they never hired her. Anat Schwartz. I mean, there were three major authors for this piece, and the main guy, Gettleman, I think that's his name. Yeah, he's still in the New York Times, and I think he's like a major journalist for them. And Anat Schwartz was a freelance, so.
And then there was her nephew, who was a food blogger.
Yeah, and I think he's still around. I'm not sure, but yeah, they threw her under the bus a little bit for her tweets. Well, not her tweets,
her
actually, likes. for her likes on Twitter, and after which, kind of miraculously, I wonder whether it's a direct result. Probably not.
Oh, Elon making the likes private.
Yeah, suddenly the likes are private.
That's also because his own likes were like brought up enough times, like him liking Nazi shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then meanwhile, the actual well-documented sexual violence against Palestinians day after day after day is completely downplayed. It is glossed over.
It's maddening.
It is, I mean, the so-called right to rape rallies that were happening. I mean, I barely saw that covered. And that was such a wild story that soldiers who are being given any consequences is only for the world to see that Israel does these things. Really, otherwise no one was being given any consequences. The soldiers that are accused of raping the Palestinian prisoners. And then there's like an uprising of the population, not to say that these are cruel, despicable acts, but to defend the soldiers, saying that, if you're doing it to a terrorist, which is basically anyone, it's justifiable. And then this guy that was, I think, part of that gang rape video behind the shields, he was like paraded around on Israeli media like some celebrity.
Yeah.
It's absurd. Like, it should be a much bigger story, and it's barely a story.
Yeah, the depths of the depravity, both right within Israeli society for normalizing the use of rape as a weapon, and within the progressive by its own eyes Western media for burying the story and for allowing Western powers to continue sponsoring the genocide is just it's unfathomable. It's like
right. Like, I mean, you hear Kamala talking about the sexual violence done by Hamas at the DNC, and no mention of the sexual violence against Palestinians when we even don't really have concrete proof. The stories that were out there have been debunked of Hamas systemic sexual violence. Like, I'm sure there was something or another, but there's no like widespread systemic thing that's been exposed, like it was being claimed using rape as a weapon. That's been exposed the other way. And yet the story's been buried again and again. And then also the human shields thing. I just heard Justin Trudeau, our prime minister, saying that just now at a recent interview, when it's just been exposed also officially, even though everyone already knew. There were reports from decades ago that this was policy in the IDF at one point or another, that they used Palestinian civilians as human shields. But, I mean, the reports are recent now from Haaretz.
Right. Yeah, but here's a question for your audience as well. Like, so we're seeing these Western powers gutting the legitimacy of their liberal bastions, gutting the legitimacy of the New York Times, of international courts, of institutions ostensibly created to prevent genocide. And at the same time, the rest of us are seeing this unfold, and a new generation of students, and not only, are seeing this happen and seeing that there's no one intervening to stop like a Western power from systematically raping and murdering Palestinian men, women, and children, and like making their own conclusions. And what can these conclusions be? Basically that only resistance, and I don't mean it in the liberal sense, obviously, but that resistance, fierce resistance, force is the only defense against total annihilation and subjugation.
Everything else is criminalized. BDS is criminalized. I mean, obviously, this isn't accepted either. But when you're backing people into a corner, I don't know, like, what they're supposed to do when they have nothing left to lose. Everything and everyone that they've loved is eliminated.
Right. And
you draw that comparison so well with, you know, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising and other rebellions. It's just, it's mind-boggling. And I'm seeing other effects of it too, like when no one trusts the media. I see sometimes like people that I respect on their perspectives on Palestine and stuff, they're turning and building alliances with like anti-vaxxers because they also feel like censored. And it's just, oh, it's so bad. But yeah, if, as you say, we're gutting the legitimacy of institutions, of media, I don't know, like there's going to be a heavy price to pay.
Yeah. Chickens will come home to roost.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support it, there are several ways you can do that. You can share it online, talk about what you just heard. You can leave a 5-star review to help others find it too. And you can also subscribe via patreon.com/nice mangoes. No E in mangoes. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter before it's completely wrecked, you'll find me at Nice Mangoes. Again, no E in mangoes.